And then it was on. A full-blown riot started as we approached the police line. All the violent punks that were there suddenly jumped out in front and engaged the cops, throwing rocks and bottles at them. We had no choice but to move forward with the crowd. The cops backed away and let the mob have it. To our left, cars were being smashed and flipped over. To the right, a carnival was set up. Okay, so welcome to my Beyond the Book series, where I talk about my book, Bohemian Ghost, a Memoir by Dewey, Moffitt. And I do some readings, some random readings from the book, so this is as close as you're going to get to a full audiobook version. Maybe eventually I'll read all the chapters and transform that into an audiobook. Let's see if there's a good demand for it. But part of the reason here is I'm getting ready to launch my next book. It's actually going to be 3 books. It's a trilogy that I've written, which is going to start to come out in 2023. So I'm very excited about that. Stay tuned for all of that. In this series, I go beyond the book, where I do an audio read of a random chapter, and then I discuss a little bit more about it. And I'll do some cool video editing to add some visuals for those who are just watching it on YouTube and whatnot. Okay, so here we go. Today I'm going to read chapter 30, A Gold Ring and a VCR. At the end of April 1992, the Jerry Garcia Band was putting on a series of shows at San Francisco's Warfield Theater, while Bama Boys JB and Kilgore happened to be paying me a visit. We parked Calvin a few blocks away from the Warfield in front of the Civic Auditorium and walked around the area a little. We noticed a couple of punk rockers putting up a flyer on a light pole. The flyer read, "Fuck the police. Rally against the Rodney King verdict. 4 p.m. today." Within minutes, the crowds marched in from different directions and began meeting up at California and Van Ness near the steps of City Hall. We stood near the rear of the crowd, listening to folks air their grievances, when some disgruntled kid next to us began shouting that we needed to get the crowd on the move and do something. People started turning around and listening to this kid. I remember giving him a high five just as he managed to get the crowd of thousands to start marching again. Kilgore's recollection is that I encouraged him quite a bit and gave the kid that extra bit of confidence he needed to speak out in the first place. I'm not going to admit that, because what followed became a very ugly incident that I'd rather not assume any responsibility for. I looked over at the kid who had gotten everyone going and watched him pick up a rock with the very hand that I had just high-fived, and then I witnessed that rock soar through the air and smash a window in San Francisco's federal building. At the very moment the glass shattered, the crowd of thousands all gasped in unison. And then it was on. A full-blown riot started as we approached the police line. All the violent punks that were there suddenly jumped out in front and engaged the cops, throwing rocks and bottles at them. We had no choice but to move forward with the crowd. The cops backed away and let the mob have it. To our left, cars were being smashed and flipped over. To the right, a carnival was set up in the square, but no one messed with the carnies as they created a barrier between the mob and the square, standing firmly with lead pipes and wrenches in their hands. It was absolutely surreal. JB and Kilgore knew for certain that their little red Ford Escort, Calvin, parked nearby, was probably going to get a good beating. Helicopters buzzed above us. The cops scrambled around in the distance, but the streets belonged to the people. The crowd was made up of many colors, as people from all ages and walks of life marched, some hand in hand. You could clearly see the tears on many faces as they felt this was a necessary but difficult action to do. The mob was moving straight ahead toward Market Street and the Warfield Theater, where the hippies were all camped out and looking for miracle tickets and swinging doses and bartering kind grilled cheeses and veggie burritos. I knew this was going to be a mess, and I thought immediately of how I could get over to the theater to warn Henry, who was there running security for the Jerry Garcia show. Somehow I managed to get out of the mob and head uphill 2 blocks into normal everyday San Francisco, where there was no sign of civil unrest. It did not seem real to me. Suddenly, the whole riot was gone. But I knew the peace wouldn't last long, so I scrambled down a few back streets and over to the back door of the Warfield and met up with Henry. I told him about the riot and the chaos that was about to go down. Just then, it hit Market Street and seemed to be spreading like wildfire. The peaceful gathering of hippies in front of the theater was ambushed by looters as window after window on Market Street met their shattered fate. Jerry Garcia stepped out of the back door and onto the sidewalk and stood next to Henry and me. "Wow, what's going on over there?" he asked curiously as we all stared at the mess on Market Street. A guy pushed a shopping cart by with pieces of a drum set and a TV on top of it. Jerry chuckled. "Someone get me a gold ring and a VCR." 2 street guys stumbled by drinking 40s out of a brown paper bag. One of them recognized Jerry. "Jerry Garcia. Shit. How you doing, Jerry? Haven't seen you in a long time." "Hey man, yeah," Jerry replied, like they were old friends. "I've been good. Playing here at the Warfield tonight." They slapped hands. "You take care now, Jerry, and be careful. It's crazy out here tonight." The 2 men walked on, although the man's friend looked confused. "Who was that?" he said. "That was Jerry Garcia. You don't know?" "Never heard of the man." "He used to play the park a long time ago." The 2 drunks stumbled on toward the chaos of Market Street. Jerry's guitar tech, Steve Parrish, opened the back door of the theater to let him know they were ready for him. They disappeared back into the venue. A few minutes later, swarms of San Francisco's finest, all riot geared up, marched by like stormtroopers in a Star Wars movie. 2 blocks away, my friend Celeste was unloading her wares into her van and witnessed someone being shot in the head at point-blank range. Apparently, a random act of street violence. She didn't know why it happened. It just seemed part of the melee swirling everywhere. The helicopters continued to buzz overhead. Trails of tear gas flowed in from around corners. There were homeless people scattered about, wearing brand new shirts and shiny Reebok tennis shoes. The place was a war zone. After the show, I met up with JB and Kilgore, and we compared stories as we walked back to the car. All the parked cars had been smashed in, some set on fire. A few were still smoldering. Yet there sat Calvin, barely touched, while the cars on either side were hardly recognizable. We drove our lucky red chariot back over the Bay Bridge into Oakland. We could see large fires all over the cities. It was an unbelievable time, like we were in a movie. There was a sobering feeling that life would never be the same again, that we'd entered into an age of urban warfare. It was truly frightening. So yeah, that's chapter 30, A Gold Ring and a VCR, from Bohemian Ghosts. It actually conjured up quite a bit for me there. I speak about a street interaction with Jerry Garcia and his head of security, Henry Sullivan, as Jerry comes out and saw part of the riot going down and kind of gave his little quirk about it, his little humor as he was trying to add to it. But as much as that little anecdote is in there, it's very serious stuff that was happening at the time, and it really was frightening. It was emotional. It was very emotional to go through a riot like that and see, at first, just everyday people, there because they wanted justice. They wanted to see a change in the system. This was 1992, May of 1992, if I remember correctly. And yeah, the Rodney King verdict had just come out, and that was a extreme pivotal time in American culture and media culture and police violence culture and all of these things. And I was 21 years old at the time and had a fortunate job working for Bill Graham, of course, which is what's covered in the book. And this was one of those real life moments that I think most people remember where they were. If you were alive in the early 90s when this took place, and what it led to society and culture, and there's still, it changed a lot of things. It was a pivotal moment. I don't know if that's the right word. Right? Pivotable? Is that? A pivoting moment. Either way. I'm supposed to be the wordsmith here, but it was a pivoting moment in our culture, in our society, and what brought us into the 90s, in a weird way. There was just so much chaos and craziness going on. And we all thought, life was never going to be the same. And in many ways, it wasn't ever the same. But things, got back to some kind of normalcy rather quickly. And that was the absurdity of it. We're driving back into Oakland, and we're seeing there's like neighborhoods on fire. There's, we were just shocked. It was a shocking thing to go through firsthand and to be a part of. And it was kind of like a war breaking out. And we thought there was just going to be a continual war, that it was just going to keep going on. As sobering as a cultural flashpoint as that was, the story has some other interesting dynamics, with the Jerry Garcia interaction. It's a very unique Jerry Garcia, personal Jerry story that about these street guys walking by that, they knew Jerry from like a different way of knowing Jerry. Just a great little story about Jerry that a lot of people might not know that haven't read the book. And Calvin, the car, the Ford Escort that I ended up with, on my own years later back in Gainesville, Florida, driving around delivering pizzas for this story that Calvin could tell. If you could write, I could write a book just from the point of view of that car alone. There's so many stories that all of our friends together and the adventures we had with him. But anyhow, that's just one little piece of Bohemian Ghosts, a memoir by Dewey Paul Moffitt. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. I really appreciate it. Would love to know your Jerry Garcia stories that maybe other people don't know about, or your personal Rodney King Riot story, or maybe even the story of a car that survived crazy situations and circumstances. Write them out. I encourage you to write your book or write your story. Come to a workshop. If you were there in 92, if you want to share some experiences with the Rodney King verdict riots that went down, please share your experiences. Write about them. Let me know what you think. This was just where I was at the time, and through my lens of looking back and what I recall happening. And but I'd love to hear other people's experiences that remember the riots and where you were, and how you perceived it, or if it had any impact or changes in your life. I know there's a lot of amazing stories out there for sure. And I would love to hear more about that. Or if you were at the shows, if you were one of those people walking by looking for a ticket to the Jerry show at the Warfield, or if you happen to catch those shows, they were pretty good. So anyhow, keep reading, keep writing, keep listening, keep spreading the love. Thank you.